"You adopted my daughter. Now you must take me too," said the poor mom to the rancher man.
Before we dive into the story, don't forget to like the video and tell us in the comments where you're watching from.
Arizona Territory, winter of 1882. Boone Maddox hadn't spoken to another living soul in 4 days. He didn't mind the quiet. After losing his wife and newborn son to fever 7 years ago, silence became his company. At 43, the man had more years behind him than ahead. He figured that often. And if the land needed a voice, the cattle had hooves and the wind had enough to say on its own. That morning, the sky was low and white. Cold pushed in from the west, not quite snow, but close. He'd ridden out before sunrise, checking the fence line east of the ridge. A pair of calves had strayed 2 nights earlier. Coyotes were hungry this time of year, and he'd found torn hide near the watering trough. He didn't want another loss. By the time he got back, his coat was stiff with frost. He dismounted slow, knees stiff, boots grinding frozen dirt as he tied off the horse of the rail. He carried a length of wire and a rusted fence spade, meaning to leave them on the porch before heading inside for coffee and something to warm his bones. That's when he heard it, faint, uneven breathing beneath the steps. He froze mid-step, knees bent, eyes narrowing. He crouched low and leaned down under the porch, brushing aside dry weeds and a drift of hay blown from the barn. There, almost hidden behind a wooden beam, was a small body curled into itself. A child, no older than 6. Mud-caked dress, 1 boot missing. Her fingers were blue, clinging to a filthy cloth doll. Her lips moved slightly, but no sound came out. Boone didn't speak. His stomach tightened with instinct more than thought. He reached in, careful not to startle her, and lifted her slowly into his arms. She weighed near nothing. He could feel her bones through her dress. She didn't cry, didn't fight. She just shook in silence. Inside, Boone stoked the stove and moved quickly. Set her down on a cot near the fire, wrapped her in a wool blanket pulled from a trunk his wife once kept full of linens. He knelt beside her, dipping a clean rag in warm water and wiping the dirt from her cheeks and hands. He didn't know what to make of her. No note, no wagon tracks, no boot prints in the hard soil around the cabin. Just the girl alone. He warmed some milk with sugar and brought it over in a chipped tin cup. She took in both hands, sipped. Her eyes didn't leave him the entire time. Boone sat back against the rocking chair, watching her in the flicker of firelight. Her skin was pale, face hollow with hunger. Dirt still lined the curve of her neck, but her eyes were sharp, alert, watching everything. He tried a question. "Where do you come from?" No answer. "Your name?" Silence. He let out a slow breath and rubbed the scar on his cheek. This wasn't the first time someone had come to his door needing help, but this was the first time they hadn't asked. He didn't take her to the mission that day, or the orphanage over in Calico Ridge. He didn't ride out to report her to the circuit lawman. He didn't do any of those things because something in her stillness, her silence, felt familiar. That night, she slept near the stove. He laid another blanket over her. Her doll was tucked beneath her chin. She didn't stir. The next morning, Boone found her outside by the chicken coop. The sun hadn't fully risen, and frost still glazed the fence posts. She was holding the feed tin in both hands, waiting for him. He nodded once. They fed the hens together in silence. By the 3rd day, she started following him to the barn, stood near while he brushed the mare, held the comb without being told. He didn't talk much. She didn't either, but she stayed close. When he came inside one evening and saw her pulling a quilt from the cot and laying it out near the stove by herself, without a word, he felt something tighten in his chest, a feeling he hadn't touched in years. He decided she needed a name. He crouched beside her the next morning, after handing her a slice of cornbread and a tin plate of eggs. "You got one?" he asked quietly. She blinked. He waited. "All right then," he said, straightening. "Lucy it is." She didn't smile, but she didn't look away either. Boone Maddox hadn't planned on becoming a father again. He wasn't sure he ever had been one. Lorna died before their boy ever saw daylight. The ranch had become his only company. The war had taken his sense of comfort with people. Disease had taken his family, and life had taken whatever else there was to give. But now there was a little girl sleeping by his fire. holding onto his hand sometimes, watching him as if to learn how the world worked again. And he let her, because the alternative, sending her off to strangers, he couldn't stomach it. By the end of the second week, she'd begun humming to herself when gathering eggs. She still didn't speak, but she stayed close. Every step he took around the homestead, she wasn't far behind. He never asked questions. He figured when she wanted to talk, she would, or she wouldn't. Either way, he'd keep feeding her. Then, 3 weeks to the day since he'd found her, something changed. It was late afternoon, cold again. The ground half thawed. A wind carried from the south, brittle and sharp. He was chopping firewood near the side of the house when he saw movement beyond the cottonwood trees. Someone stumbling through the brush. He squinted, reached for the Henry rifle leaning against the porch post, but didn't lift it yet. The figure got closer. A woman. She was barefoot, dirt to the knees, her hair wild and tangled, whipping across her face. Her dress hung in tatters. She limped with every step and clutched her ribs like something inside was broken. Boone stepped out further, jaw tight, weapon still down but ready. She saw him, then looked past him toward the window where Lucy was sitting near the fire, turning the doll in her hands. The woman's breath hitched. Her knees gave way and she fell forward, catching herself with a shaking hand. Her voice cracked out, low and dry. "You adopted my daughter." Boone didn't move. "Now you must take me too." He didn't say a word. His hand tightened once on the wood of the rifle, then let go. He walked to the door, opened it, and stepped aside. The woman's eyes welled, but she didn't fall again. She stood with effort, limped forward, and crossed the threshold. Boone stepped back just enough for the woman to pass through the doorway. She didn't look at him. Her eyes stayed fixed on the warmth inside, on the fire, on the cot, on the little girl now rising slowly to her feet. The doll clutched her chest. The woman barely cleared the threshold before her knees buckled again. Boone caught her under one arm. Her skin was cold, not just from the wind, but from something deeper: hunger, exhaustion, too many nights without shelter. She smelled of smoke and blood and weeks of road. Her shoulder trembled under his hand, but she didn't pull away. Lucy didn't move. She stared at the woman, chest rising fast, eyes wide but unblinking. Then slowly, she stepped forward, 3 steps, barefoot on the wood floor, and stopped. Her doll hung limp at her side. The woman's lips cracked again as she tried to speak, her voice barely a sound. "Lucy." The girl blinked once, then nodded. She didn't run. She didn't cry out. She just walked up and placed her little hand on the woman's skirt, right over the torn fabric at her hip, and held it there. The woman dropped to her knees again, this time slow and careful, and pulled the child into her arms. She exhaled like something inside her had finally given out. Boone didn't interrupt. He walked past them both, set a pan of water on the stove, and stoked the fire higher. He didn't ask questions, didn't speak. Lucy pressed her face into her mother's neck and stayed there. The woman, Mariah, barely looked up for several minutes. When she finally did, she swayed where she knelt. Boone saw it and set a tin cup of warm water near her hand. She took it. Her fingers shook so hard the water sloshed on her wrist. She drank anyway, her throat working slowly, painfully. Boone watched from the side of the room, arms crossed. His thoughts moved slower than his hands. He'd seen wounded men after battle walk straighter than this woman. Her face was drawn and bruised. A healing cut split her lip. Dirt streaked her hairline. But beneath it, there was something sharp, alert, not just survival, but grit. He waited another beat, then asked, "You or Ma?" Mariah looked at him, startled by the voice, then nodded, still holding Lucy. He didn't follow with more. Instead, he nodded toward the cot. "You'll sleep there." She nodded again. Nothing more. Boone noticed the weight on her left side, how she kept her arm tight to her ribs. She was hurt worse than she let on. He moved to the shelf, pulled down a clean cloth, and set it beside her. "You bleeding anywhere I need to see to?" Mariah glanced at it, then shook her head once. "Just bruises." He left it there anyway. That night, Boone made stew with the last of the salted venison and a potato that had begun to sprout. He served 3 bowls, setting one near the woman, one for Lucy, and one for himself. Mariah barely ate half before setting it down, her hand trembling too hard to lift the spoon again. Lucy ate slowly, watching them both between every bite. They didn't talk through supper. Boone never expected it, but the silence wasn't empty. It was full of questions. Who was the man that let this happen? Why was the girl alone under his porch? How far had Mariah walked? Boone didn't ask. He figured whatever was important would come when it needed to. Later, after Lucy fell asleep in her mother's arms, Mariah sat against the wall near the stove. She didn't make eye contact, but her voice came out steady. "He sold me." Boone looked over from the rocker. She wasn't looking at him, just down at her own bruised hands. She continued, "My husband, Ethan, in Tucumcari, owed money to a gambler named Pike. Thought if he traded me over, the debt would go away. It didn't." She adjusted her legs, wincing. "They kept me locked up. Lucy was with me. First few days. And she was gone. I thought." Her voice broke for the first time. She swallowed. "I thought she was dead." Boone didn't say a word. Just watched her, still and quiet. "I tracked her. Best I could. I heard a wagon lost a kid near the pass. I walked 2 towns asking. Then someone at the Mercantile in Cold Hollow said a rancher out this way had taken in a girl. Little, curly hair, doll in her hand. She finally turned her eyes to his. I didn't expect to find her alive." Boone took a slow breath and nodded once. She was under the porch. Mariah closed her eyes tight, as if that image alone was too much. Boone stood, took his empty bowl, and stacked it with the rest in the basin. He didn't press her, didn't offer pity. He figured she wouldn't want it. He'd seen the kind of pride it took for a woman to walk barefoot across miles of hard country with bruises on her ribs and a child in her mind. When he returned to the hearth, she was still sitting there, arms around herself now. "I don't expect anything," she said suddenly. "I just wanted to see her. Know she was safe. If you want me gone tomorrow." Boone interrupted for the first time. "You're not going anywhere." Mariah stared at him. "You're too hurt to walk. And she needs you." He meant it practical, not soft, not emotional. But his words hung there longer than he expected. And Mariah, silent again, nodded once and leaned her head back against the wall. Lucy stirred during the night and crawled from the cot to the spot between them, laying down half on the rug, half on Mariah's leg. Boone draped a second blanket over all 3 and went back to his chair by the window. He sat there most of the night, eyes on the dark ridge outside. Something had changed. There were 2 women under his roof now. One who had been quiet for weeks, another who had walked through hell to find her. Boone didn't know what he was yet. Protector? Stranger? Something in between. But he knew one thing for certain. He wasn't sending them away. Not now. Not ever. Morning came gray and sharp. Thin frost clung to the windows, and the smell of ash and cold stew hung in the air. Boone was up first. He moved around the cabin with quiet purpose, feeding the stove, washing out the tin bowls, brushing the frost from the porch rail. His boots creaked on the floorboards, and the cold bit through the cracks in the wood walls. Inside, Lucy was still curled next to her mother, both of them wrapped in the quilt. Boone paused by the fire and studied them. 2 shapes huddled close, breathing slow, arms wound around each other like they'd always belonged. He turned and went outside. The sun hadn't fully cleared the ridge when he saddled his horse. He needed to make a trip into town, Calico Ridge. Supplies were running low. He hadn't planned to feed 3 mouths. He hesitated before mounting, hand resting on the saddle horn. The thought of leaving them alone didn't sit right. Not now. Not with what Mariah had been through. Not with Lucy still not talking. So he unsaddled the horse again and stepped back inside. They'd manage another day without Flower. When Mariah woke, she sat up slow, wincing, her face drawn tight from pain in her ribs. Lucy sat beside her, doll in hand, watching Boone from under her hair. Boone set down a cup of warm water and a slice of cornbread by Mariah's side. "You need a doctor," he said plainly. "I need time," she answered. "You've got that, but you'll need more if those ribs don't set right." She didn't argue, just nodded once and took the cornbread. Her hand still shook. Boone sat across from her at the small kitchen table. The quiet stretched again, not uncomfortable, but heavy. Mariah broke it first. "What do you do out here?" "Raise cattle. Fix fences. Sell what I can in town come spring." "You live here alone?" "7 years now." "Your family?" Boone didn't look at her. Gone. Mariah didn't push. She just nodded and looked toward Lucy. She don't talk much, Boone said after a pause. She stopped after Pike took her. He's still looking? No, she said. He left me for dead. Probably thinks we both are. Boone stared at her for a moment, measuring that. You're safe here. No one comes this way unless they're lost or stupid. Mariah gave the faintest smile, the first he'd seen. It didn't stay long. Later that day, Boone showed Lucy how to brush the horses again. She followed him to the barn, hands in her coat sleeves, eyes wary. Mariah stood just outside the cabin, leaning on the doorframe, arms crossed over her ribs as she watched them. She didn't interrupt, just watched the way Boone crouched beside Lucy, handed her the brush, pointed to the mare's shoulder. The way he kept one hand on the girl's back as she worked the stiff bristles. Mariah took a step forward, then another. By midday, she was gathering the eggs from the chicken coop, moving slow but moving. Boone saw her from the field and didn't say anything. Just kept working the gate with the pliers, one eye on the barn, the other on the house. By late afternoon, Mariah was standing beside him, watching the wire tension as he pulled it taut along the posts. I used to help my father mend fence, she said, arms crossed again, sleeves pulled over her hands. Missouri. Boone glanced at her. You know knots. Double hitch. He handed her the end of the line. They worked without another word for over an hour. That night, Lucy lay between them on the cot again. Mariah leaned against the wall with her eyes half closed, and Boone sat in the rocker with his rifle across his lap. Same as always. Mariah spoke without looking up. I don't want to be a burden. You're not. I don't have anything to offer. Boone didn't answer at first. He shifted in the chair, set the rifle aside, and leaned forward with his forearms on his knees. You gave her back, he said finally. That's more than most. Mariah's lip trembled. She turned her face to the wall and didn't reply. Boone didn't press. Later, as the fire dimmed, Lucy stirred again and climbed into Boone's lap without a word. He held her there. Her little body rested against his chest, head under his chin, doll between them. Boone looked across at Mariah. She was watching. She didn't speak. Her eyes were wide and tired, but something in them looked different. Not fear, not shame, maybe the start of something else. That night, Boone didn't sleep much. He listened to their breathing, thought about what had changed. 3 weeks ago, it was just a man, a stove, and the sound of horses in the morning. Now it was more. He didn't say it out loud, but in his mind he knew this wasn't temporary, and he wasn't going to let them go. The days passed slow but full. A routine settled over the homestead. Not spoken, not planned, just built piece by piece like fence rails along a line that didn't need to be measured anymore. Boone rose first, same as always, feeding the fire and checking the livestock. But now there were extra footsteps behind him. Sometimes they were Lucy's, quiet and light, following with the carefulness of someone afraid to step wrong. Other times they were Mariah's, slower still, but growing steadier with each morning. Boone watched her more than he let on. The way she carried herself now, still guarded but not hollow. She cooked without asking permission. She swept the floor without being told. She spoke more, though never about herself unless it came up naturally. The bruises on her ribs had started to yellow. Her lip had healed. Her hand still trembled sometimes, mostly when she thought no one was watching. Boone noticed. Lucy still didn't speak, but she started laughing, quietly, mostly when feeding the hens or when Boone let her sit on the saddle while he walked the horse in circles around the barn. Once, she touched his beard and smiled like she'd never seen one before. Boone had paused, unsure what to do, and simply let her. It was near the end of the second month when Mariah finally stepped into the corral while Boone was breaking in a young colt. She leaned on the rail, arms crossed, hair tied back with one of Lorna's old ribbons Boone had left on a hook without thinking. You ever need help with that? She asked. He didn't answer at first, just looked at her, then back at the horse. You're right. My father kept 2 Mares, she said. I used to ride before I met Ethan. Boone didn't flinch at the name, but he felt something shift in his chest. She rarely said it out loud. Mariah climbed the fence slowly, careful with her ribs, and sat on the top rail. He hated horses, she added, said they cost too much and gave too little. Boone said nothing. The colt pawed at the dirt, pulling at the reins. Boone clicked his tongue and walked in slow, calming circles. He felt Mariah's eyes on him the whole time. After he got the horse settled, they walked back to the barn together. He handed her a shovel, and she took it without question, helping him muck the stalls. That night, something changed. Lucy had fallen asleep earlier than usual. Mariah tucked her into the cot and turned toward the fire, rubbing her hands over her arms. Boone handed her a cup of coffee, not too strong, warmed with a bit of condensed milk, and sat down in the rocker across from her. The silence between them was different now. Not just shared, chosen. Mariah looked up. "I didn't think she'd remember me," she said. "Lucy, after I got taken, I figured she was too little to hold on to me." "She did," Boone said. "Didn't talk, barely moved at first, but she kept hold of that doll. Tight." Mariah nodded, eyes glassy in the firelight. She was quiet even before. But after Pike, something changed. Boone sipped his coffee. "She's different now, but not broken," he said. Mariah gave a long, shaky breath. "Neither am I. I thought I was. For a long time." She didn't look at him when she said it, but she didn't need to. Boone felt the weight of it settle between them like something earned, not confessed. He set his cup down. "You staying?" he asked quietly. She turned her head. "What? You planning to go once the snow clears?" Mariah didn't answer right away. Her fingers moved over the hem of her dress. She stared into the fire. "I thought I should," she said. "Didn't want to overstep. Didn't want to take what wasn't mine." Boone stood up slowly, walked to the stove, poured more water into the kettle, buying time with movement. "You're not a guest," he said. "You didn't take anything." She didn't respond. Boone finally turned to face her, his voice steady. "You want to be here, you stay. No debt, no owing. Just stay." Mariah stood slowly. She didn't approach him. She just looked at him, like seeing the truth of something she tried not to name. "You sure?" Boone nodded once. Mariah stepped closer, and for the first time since she'd arrived, she reached out. Her fingers touched the edge of his shirt sleeve, nothing more than that. But Boone felt it. It wasn't affection. Not yet. It was permission. They stood like that for several seconds, fire crackling behind them, Lucy breathing soft in the cot. Then Mariah pulled back and whispered, "I'll stay." Boone nodded again, slower this time. "All right." They didn't speak again that night. Boone returned to the chair. Mariah laid beside Lucy. But long after the fire dimmed, her eyes stayed open, watching the shape of Boone's shoulders as he sat quietly, as he had every night. She didn't know if this would last. She didn't dare ask what they were becoming. But for the first time in years, she didn't want to run. And for Boone, without needing to say it, he'd already made his decision. She belonged here. Both of them did. Spring came slow to the Arizona territory. The snow didn't melt all at once, but in cautious patches, first around the chicken coop, then along the base of the fence posts. The wind lost its bite. The mornings held less silence, more birdsong. But for Boone Maddox, change didn't come from the ground or the trees. It came from inside the cabin. Mariah now took the morning chores without being asked. Lucy stayed close to her mother, but still wandered after Boone when he headed to the barn. Some evenings, all three of them sat around the table at supper, and the space between them no longer felt full of questions. It just felt like a life. Still, Boone had been holding something back. He hadn't told her about the grave. It sat out behind the barn, marked with a simple wooden cross and a name carved in rough lines. Lorna Maddox. His wife. Gone 7 years. He hadn't spoken her name aloud in just as long. He still walked out there once a week. Not out of grief anymore, just respect. But Mariah didn't know. And Boone hadn't figured out how or why to bring it up. One morning, she found it herself. Boone had taken Lucy to check the stream. The girl was laughing, soft but real, picking up small rocks and showing them off like treasures. By the time they returned to the house, Mariah stood out back by the fence line, eyes locked on the grave. Boone's stomach tightened. She didn't turn as he approached. Just said, "She was your wife?" He stopped beside her. "Yeah." Mariah was quiet. "She died here?" Boone nodded once. "Fever. Took her and the baby." She finally turned her eyes to him. "You bury her yourself?" Didn't trust no one else to do it right. Mariah looked back at the cross. "You loved her?" Boone didn't answer quickly. "Yeah, I did." Mariah didn't press more, but she didn't walk away either. She stood there beside him a while longer, hands in the pockets of her dress, hair catching in the wind. Then she said, "I'm not her. I know. I don't want to replace her." "You're not." She looked up at him again. Her eyes didn't shy away. "But I want to be here, if that's still all right." Boone didn't blink. "It is." They walked back to the house without another word. That was enough. The next week, Boone finally rode into Calico Ridge to resupply. He'd avoided it for too long. There were things they needed now. More flour, fresh lye, fabric for Mariah, boots that fit Lucy. It was the first time he'd left them since Mariah arrived. Before leaving, he walked her through the rifle, showed her where he kept the extra shells, and pointed to the latch on the cellar. "If someone rides up, you don't answer the door unless you know the face." Mariah nodded, serious. "We'll be all right." Boone didn't say it, but the pit in his stomach didn't come from distrust. It came from care. In town, Boone kept his business brief. Folks in Calico Ridge were used to seeing him alone. A few glanced his way longer than usual when he bought a bolt of fabric and small shoes. He ignored the stares. What mattered was back on the ridge. When he returned that evening, the cabin was warm, the fire going, stew already on the stove. Lucy ran to the door before he knocked. She didn't speak, but she wrapped her arms around his leg and held tight. Boone looked down, surprised by it, then gently placed a hand on her back. Mariah stepped out from the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron. "You came back." Boone nodded, said I would. She gave a tired but honest smile and returned to the pot. That night, after Lucy fell asleep on the cot, Boone stepped out onto the porch. Mariah followed. The sky was deep blue, stars hanging low and bright. A coyote called in the far distance, barely a note above the wind. Mariah leaned on the post beside him. "She's getting better." "Yeah," Boone said. "She started drawing in the dirt today." Said something that sounded like "Mama." Not clear, but close. Boone didn't answer. He watched the sky for a long while. Mariah looked over at him. "You all right?" He didn't speak for a few seconds. Then, "Didn't think I'd ever have this again." She waited. "A home. Someone waiting for me at the door." Mariah's voice was steady. "Neither did I." They didn't say anything else. But after a few minutes, Mariah leaned her head against his shoulder. Boone didn't move. He didn't need to. This wasn't a promise. Not yet, but it was close. And for both of them, after everything they'd survived, that was enough for now. The mornings had shifted, not just in weather, but in weight. Boone could feel it every time he stepped out onto the porch and saw Mariah already at the stove, Lucy brushing hay from the porch with her small hands. It wasn't survival anymore. It was habit, shared routine, a shape of life that felt more solid than anything he'd had since burying his wife. Mariah hummed sometimes now, usually while folding clothes or fixing Lucy's braid. Boone didn't say anything about it, but he listened longer than necessary when she did. But for all the quiet peace they had earned, one thing hadn't been said. No one had spoken Ethan Vane's name since that first night. Boone hadn't asked what became of him. Mariah hadn't offered, but it lingered, especially now that the snow had melted completely and riders passed through the territory again. Strangers came through Calico Ridge. Word traveled, and with it, danger. It was mid-April when Boone returned from town with news he hadn't expected. He found Mariah kneeling by the chicken coop, her sleeves rolled and hands dusted with cornmeal. Lucy was beside her, giggling as she chased a stray hen across the yard. Boone dismounted, tied off his horse, and stood watching them for a moment. Then he called out, "Mariah." She turned at the tone. Serious. Not panicked, but different. She stood slowly, wiped her hands. Inside, after Lucy had settled with her slate board and chalk, Boone poured water into a basin and leaned his weight on the table. "Someone in town recognized your name." Mariah froze, her face pale, jaw tight. "Ethan?" she asked. Boone nodded once. "He's dead." She blinked hard, the words not sinking in right away. "Marshall from Lordsburg said he was found hanged in a dry creek bed. Gambling dispute. Shot someone. Tried to run. Mob caught up." Mariah sat slowly on the edge of the bed, staring at nothing. Boone gave her space. When she finally spoke, it was quiet. "I thought I'd feel something." "Do you?" She shook her head. "Just tired." Boone understood that. There were griefs that hit all at once, and others that faded out before you ever got to mourn them. This one, it seemed, had already died long ago. Mariah looked up after a while. Does that change anything? Boone answered without hesitation. No. She nodded slowly. Good. That night, something shifted again. Lucy had fallen asleep early. Boone was out back splitting logs by moonlight. Mariah watched him from the window a long time before stepping out with a tin lantern in hand. He paused when she approached. Sweat lined his brow despite the chill. Need something? He asked. Mariah shook her head. Just didn't want to be inside alone. Boone nodded, set the axe down, wiped his hands on a rag, and leaned against the stump. Mariah held the lantern low. It's like casting a slow dance across the dirt between them. I thought about leaving once Ethan was gone, she admitted. For good. Figured it might be time to make my own way again. Boone didn't react. But I don't want to. She stepped closer. Not timid. Not hesitant. I don't want to start over. Not when we've already started something here. Boone met her eyes. You don't have to explain yourself. I know, but I want to. She took another step. I see how Lucy looks at you. Like she belongs. I feel it too. Boone's voice was steady. I ain't the same man I used to be. I don't know how to court. Don't know how to ask a woman for anything right. Mariah smiled, small but honest. Then don't ask. She reached up and placed her hand against his chest. Just rested it there. Boone didn't flinch. He brought his own hand to hers, gently. They stood like that, lantern light swaying. Nothing else but the quiet wind and distant sound of a horse stirring in the barn. Mariah whispered, "We can make this work." Boone's voice was barely above a breath. "We already are." She leaned up and kissed him, not rushed, not deep, just a kiss that said she'd chosen this place, this man, this life. When she pulled back, she smiled faintly. Boone's hand stayed on her waist. He nodded once. That night, they didn't go back into the house separately. Lucy was already asleep, her doll under one arm, curled against the quilt. Boone banked the fire while Mariah closed the shutters. They didn't speak more. But when she walked into his room, instead of returning to the cot, he didn't stop her. And when she laid down beside him, pulling the blanket high and her back to his chest, Boone held her without hesitation. Not for warmth, not for comfort, but because it was time, because this was home now, for all three of them. The rhythm of their life held steady through late spring, not fast, not loud, just sure. Boone rose early. Mariah followed not long after, pulling her shawl around her shoulders, even when the sun warmed the window panes. Lucy's laughter was regular now, small bursts that came out when she fed the chickens or rode behind Boone on the horse to the far ridge. They had no visitors, no interruptions. But Boone knew peace like this never stayed untouched forever. It was the third week of May when a rider came. Boone spotted the dust plume from the far edge of the north pasture. He stopped mid-step, one hand on the fence post, eyes narrowing. The rider wasn't moving fast, no chase, no threat, but he was coming with intent. Boone walked back to the cabin and stepped inside, calm but firm. "Mariah," he said, "there's a man riding up." She straightened where she stood at the wash basin, drying Lucy's dress. Her fingers gripped the cloth tighter. "Who? Don't know yet, but I don't want you outside till I say so." Mariah nodded, heart already in her throat. Boone stepped out onto the porch just as the rider crested the rise. He came slow, his horse tired and lean, hat pulled low. He looked like a man who'd ridden far without sleep. Dust covered his boots, and he had the look of someone used to giving orders but not getting answers. When he stopped at the fence line, Boone didn't speak first. He just stood there, arms folded. "You Boone Maddox?" the man called out. Boone nodded once. "That's right." The man leaned forward in his saddle. "Name's Dalton Pike. My brother was Lonnie Pike." Boone didn't move. "Heard he died in Lordsburg, hung by a mob. But word is before that, he was running with a woman. One he didn't keep." Boone's jaw tightened. "I'm not here for trouble," Dalton continued. "I just want to know if the woman's alive. I ain't like my brother. Just want to settle what's left." Boone kept his voice even. "She's alive." Dalton exhaled like that was the answer he'd come a long way to get. "She got a kid?" "Why?" Dalton looked him in the eye. "Because if that child's got Pike blood in her, there might be folks looking to settle debts later." Lonnie ran up more than cards. Boone stepped off the porch. "She's not his." Dalton didn't argue. "Fair enough. Just had to see it through." Boone stopped 2 feet from the fence. What are you planning to do now? Turn around. Ride out. Just didn't want no surprises down the line. Boone nodded slowly. You've done your asking. Keep riding. Dalton touched the brim of his hat. I won't be back. Boone watched him ride off, waited until he disappeared in the dust, then turned and walked back inside. Mariah was at the table. Lucy sat on her lap, wide-eyed. Boone shut the door behind him and looked her in the eye. Pike's brother came looking for answers. I gave them. Mariah's voice shook. Is he coming back? No. And if he does, he'll regret it. She held Lucy tighter. What did he want? Boone hesitated, then stepped closer. He wanted to know if Lucy was Lonnie's. Mariah stiffened. She's not. She never was. Ethan was her father, for better or worse. I know. Boone crouched beside them, hand resting on the edge of the table. No one's gonna take her. Or you. You're here now. That's all that matters. Mariah looked at him for a long moment, then whispered, I didn't know if I'd ever feel safe again. You are. That night, after Lucy fell asleep between them again, her breath soft and steady, Mariah turned toward Boone, lying beside her under the shared quilt. I want to stay in your room from now on. Every night. Boone nodded. You already do. She reached for his hand under the blanket and held it. I want more, she whispered. Boone didn't ask what she meant. He just waited. Mariah's voice was steady but low. I want to be yours. Fully. I don't want to be someone you're protecting anymore. I want to be someone you chose. Boone looked at her. The firelight played across her face, and he saw no fear there. Only certainty. I did choose you, he said. The moment you stepped onto that porch. She smiled, tired, grateful, warm. And that night, beneath that roof, with no need for grand words or promises, they became something more. No longer just survivors, but a family. The sun rose earlier now. Warmth lingered in the mornings. Grass pushed up fresh along the lower pastures. Boone could smell water in the air. The land was changing, and so was the house. Mariah moved freely now, no more flinching when she reached overhead or bent at the waist. She laughed more, touched Boone's shoulder without hesitation. Lucy followed her mother everywhere, but now also wandered out to the barn on her own sometimes, her bare feet leaving soft prints in the dirt. She had begun speaking again, a few quiet words at a time. Mama Boone, chickens, home. Boone didn't mention it the first time she said his name. He just nodded, handed her the feed tin, and watched her grin before running off to scatter corn like it was the most natural thing in the world. By now, the 3 of them slept in the same room. Lucy on a cot by the fire. Boone and Mariah in the bed behind the curtain. They hadn't made grand declarations, no wedding, no preacher, but they all knew what they were. They had become something whole, something permanent. One afternoon, Boone rode into town again for supplies. Only this time, Mariah came with him. It wasn't planned. She simply stood on the porch as he readied the horse and said, I'm coming with you. He studied her a moment. You sure? I've got no reason to hide anymore. Boone didn't argue. He helped her into the saddle behind him, and Lucy stayed with a neighbor 3 ridges over, a widowed farm woman who'd taken a liking to the girl. On the way into town, Mariah kept her arms around Boone's waist, head resting against his back. She didn't speak. Neither did he, but the silence wasn't heavy. It was settled. Calico Ridge wasn't a big town, but it was busy enough for stares. Mariah kept her chin high. Some folks whispered, likely still thinking of Boone Maddox as the reclusive widower, the man who talked more to horses than people. But nobody said anything to his face. They visited the general store first. Boone picked up flour, nails, and a small sack of sugar. Mariah quietly asked the shopkeeper for thread, muslin cloth, and new boots for Lucy. The shopkeeper, Mrs. Quinn, raised an eyebrow, but didn't speak until Mariah had finished. She yours then? She asked softly. Mariah didn't flinch. She's ours. Mrs. Quinn smiled just a little. She looked happier last time he brought her to town. I wondered what changed. Mariah only said, she came home. Outside, Boone loaded the supplies into the saddlebag. Mariah stood beside him, arms folded. You all right? He asked. I'm not scared anymore, she said. It feels strange. Boone gave her a slow look. You don't have to be scared here. Not ever again. They rode home in the low light of sunset. The sky glowed orange over the hills. Birds cut across the ridgeline. Boone kept one hand on the reins, the other lightly resting over Mariah's where she held him. When they returned, Lucy ran out from the neighbor's porch, shouting, "Mama!" Mariah lifted her down from the saddle and wrapped her arms around the girl. That night, after supper, Boone stood on the porch again, the stars spread wide above the ranch. Mariah stepped out beside him, a folded blanket around her shoulders. "There's something I need to tell you," she said. Boone turned toward her, quiet. Mariah hesitated. I might be pregnant." She watched him carefully, unsure of what reaction she'd find. Her fingers tensed under the blanket. Boone didn't speak right away. He let the thoughts settle. Then he exhaled through his nose and stepped closer. "You all right with that?" Mariah nodded. "I didn't expect to be, but yes, I am." Boone touched her face gently, thumb along her cheek. "Then so am I." She let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "I thought you might be angry, that it might be too soon." Boone shook his head. "Nothing about this is too soon. We've already been through worse." She leaned into him, forehead against his chest. "I just didn't think I'd get this again." "You didn't get it," Boone said quietly. "You earned it." They stood like that for a while, wrapped in quiet, the land still around them. Inside, Lucy slept by the fire, the doll still clutched in her hands, the same one she'd been holding when Boone found her beneath the porch all those months ago. Tomorrow there would be chores, fences to mend, mouths to feed. Life would go on as it had, but now, something more was coming. A future. And for once, none of them feared it. The heat of summer rolled in slow over the ridge, settling thick across the valley. Boone moved slower now, not from age, but from awareness, aware of the quiet weight of a house no longer hollow, of a woman humming softly in the kitchen, and of a child who ran barefoot across the hard-packed yard without fear. 3 months had passed since Mariah told him she was expecting. Her body had changed slightly, nothing drastic yet, but enough for Boone to start noticing how she braced herself when getting up, how her hand lingered just a second longer over her belly when no one was looking. She didn't talk about it much. She didn't need to. The way she touched Lucy's hair, the way she kept the crib Boone had built in the corner by the window, those said more than words. One morning, Boone finished oiling the saddle and stepped inside to find Lucy sitting at the table, tongue tucked in the corner of her mouth as she traced letters on a scrap of paper. Mariah stood over the stove, stirring oats. The smell of cinnamon and heat filled the room. Lucy looked up, held the paper high. "I wrote our name." Boone took the paper. In crooked letters, with one backward in, it read, "Maddox." Boone looked at Mariah. She turned, smiling quietly. "She asked last night if she was really part of us," she said. Boone knelt beside Lucy and pointed at the word. "You are. You always were." Mariah sat across from them, resting a hand on her growing stomach. "We just hadn't written it down yet." Later that week, Boone took his wagon into Calico Ridge with a clear purpose. No extra stops, no time wasted. When he returned, he carried a folded paper in his vest pocket and a small tin box under his arm. He waited until nightfall. Mariah was outside brushing Lucy's hair. The girl sat still on the porch steps, staring at the fireflies. Boone walked up, set the box down, and held out the folded paper. Mariah took it, opening it slow, eyes scanning the lines. "What is this?" she asked, though her voice already knew. "It's a record, a legal one, signed by the justice in Calico Ridge." She blinked down at it, throat tightening. "You adopted her." Boone nodded. "I didn't want her to carry anyone else's name. She's ours." Mariah set the paper aside carefully and pulled Lucy into her arms. Boone watched the two of them, jaw tight, not from worry, but from everything it took to get here. When Lucy finally went to bed, Boone and Mariah stood in the doorway, firelight behind them, the open land stretching beyond. Boone reached into his pocket again and handed her the tin box. She opened it slowly. Inside sat a simple silver ring. No stone, just plain, strong, and made to last. Boone cleared his throat. "I know it ain't fancy. I made it myself." Mariah turned it in her fingers. "Why now?" Boone looked at her. "Because I want this to be yours just as much as it's mine." You walked through hell to find your daughter, then stayed to build something with me. You never asked for anything, but you deserve everything." She stepped forward, eyes shining. "This isn't something I ever expected." Boone gently took her hand and slid the ring onto her finger. "Me neither, but I'm glad it found us anyway." She stood on her toes, kissed him longer this time, and rested her forehead against his. "We're a family now, all the way." Boone's voice was quiet. "We always were." That fall, the baby came early in the morning, just before the frost returned. Boone never left the cabin. Mariah clutched his hand the entire time, never crying out louder than necessary. Lucy stayed by the stove, clutching her doll, eyes wide but calm. When the cries came, small, sharp, healthy, it was Mariah who laughed first. A deep, relieved sound that Boone hadn't heard from her in all the months they'd known each other. "It's a boy," she whispered. Boone held him in the stillness of dawn, wrapped in wool, his breathing strong. Lucy stepped close, peered at her baby brother, then leaned in and kissed his head without saying a word. They named him Samuel. Later that night, Boone stepped out onto the porch, holding the boy to his chest. The land stretched out quiet before him. Coyotes howled far off, but it felt distant, not dangerous. Behind him, Mariah slept with Lucy curled against her side. Boone looked down at his son. He didn't speak often, but this time he did. "You'll never be alone." He stayed there for a long time, not watching the horizon, but the doorway behind him, because everything that mattered was already inside, and he wasn't going anywhere.